Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of Unscripted and Unchained RPG Review. I am DM Bloodworth, and as you can see by the graphics, today I'm going to be talking about the process that I use for world building. So I'm basically going to do a series of videos as I'm going through my current D&D campaign, and this is by request of one of my newest players. He had asked if I could come up with a video to explain some of the background for the world that they're in. He has just come on, and so we've had about 7 or 8 sessions already. And so, not having been there from the beginning, he's coming into a world that has already started to become fleshed out. And so this video is going to be the first in a series, and the first that will just focus a little bit on how I develop worlds for whatever game that I happen to be playing and creating new campaigns. So here we go. We're going to launch right into World Building 101. Now, I am by no means the say all and end all of this. Every single dungeon master out there, or game master if you're using other game systems, every one of us out there eventually gets around to creating our own worlds, and we're all going to have different methods of doing that. I like to I like to kind of take a look at what the world is going to look like first, and then see if that sparks any interesting ideas in my own mind, and then I go from there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the process that I used for this, and the first thing that I wanted to do was I wanted to come up with a map, and then I would build everything from there. So I'm going to switch us over to my view here. So this is an online this is an online fantasy continent map generator. All right, so it is called Asgar's. I guess I'm pronouncing that right. Fantasy map generator. And as you can see here, there's a map that automatically comes up, and I could look at this map. I kind of like what this map looks like. Uh, I can come into this map and I can say, all right, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to perhaps rename a few of these places, or I could just go with what it says here and, start taking a look at this map, and you can zoom in and out. Like I said, I really like the layout of this. It would make a great map to build from. You can see there's a variety, a number of different what you can call nations, and they appear to be color coded based on something. I'd have to actually dig in and see. And you can zoom in to any one spot here. So I'll come in on the kingdom of Hazamulk, and the further and further I scroll in, and I can move, and I can start to see this is clearly its capital city, and we have major trade routes and such, and different names. The only thing I wasn't crazy about this is that I don't know what the I don't know what the cultural naming is for for some of these. It has some, if I go here and I go and I look at if I go into these options here and I'm looking to see uh, tools, I can go into cultures, and we see all of the countries listed and what their cultures are. And that is, so here's the name. So here we have name bases are Hungarian, Celtic, uh, Ruthenian. I'm not too sure about Finnish, Greek, German, French. So these have some, these have the cultures, and the languages, and just some of them seem to be, out of the just total fiction, and so the names become kind of, complex to deal with. This one here, I kind of like the fact that it states the cultures, so I'm not quite sure which country. This might be the country that I'm actually in, yes. So this is going to be Hungarian culture. And so when I zoom in here, these should be words somewhat understandable in Hungarian, um, or might be straight Hungarian. I'm not even sure. But that's the first thing. So once I start looking at this map, I can, and I'll close this window here. So I can see there's quite a lot, and really I do really like the layout of this map. Um, we can start to see how the different regions. So these would be this is a whole, big empire down here. Has some mountainous, very cold regions here. Possibly some place where I can throw, um, you know, frost dragons and dwarves and mountain giants and such. Number of different cultures that you can establish up and around here. So we have another empire that's kind of sandwiched in part of here. I could start thinking about the political interactions that might exist here, and just as I said, looking at the image, I can start to form different ideas about the various places. When I come over here, I can see that, when I was looking at political regions and such, I can see that, these islands also somewhat include these as well. And I can say that these are potentially disputed between this country and here. This might have been part of this larger empire here. Um, Small country, pretty much surrounded. So I can come up with a variety of ways to explain, what's going on there. A totally separate location over here on this island. So we have the Republic of Artia, and we have the Stockhofian Empire, and here is the dividing line. We can see here that they have different cultural breakdowns, so roughly 3 different cultures or 4 different cultures within here, whereas there's only 2 potentially here. Um, Now I will bring up, so if I wanted to just take a look at a new map, when I go here I can just click and it will generate a whole new map. And there we have a whole new map. And once again, you can keep on just changing that up and keep on refreshing for a new map to come up with something that you're looking for. I wanted to go a little bit more simple, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to load and go into storage. And here's my current the current continent that my current campaign is taking place on. So as you can see, here I kept it very simple, one large landmass. I can always add other continents into the campaign as we move along. This map originally had 2 separate separation here. This was a whole different continent, country. But what I wanted to do was I kind of got stuck on my head, and maybe it was from Games of Thrones or whatever. But I wanted 7 distinct realms that the player characters would start to be introduced to. The concept of these 7 different realms, and each one has its own political goals and such. And they would take place. They would start their adventures off in the largest and most powerful of those realms, but one that had just stepped out of a long-standing war, a 10-year war, in the process of annexing annexing this lower region here that you can see. Now, currently, my players are in this town here. Um, they had come from the north, from the capital city. And anytime you're world building, it's always best, at least in my opinion, to start small and to keep on expanding outwards. So 7 or 8 weeks ago, my players were in this small town of Kandy, not even having access to the capital city of Carador yet. And they did several adventures there. And as they had started to build up their reputation, they were able to move into the city proper of Conde. They did one or two adventures there, made some contacts there. Then they went to the capital city very, very briefly. They had set foot in the capital city, and before they could even become established, one of the players, the fighter in the group, he was um, he was ordered basically to go to a struggling garrison down here in this town, and so he and three other of the player characters had traveled down there. The rest of the gaming group couldn't come together that particular day, so we just started this off, and they started to adventure down in this region. I am going to have them go back up to the capital city because, as I said, my philosophy is you build up from small and you go larger. So, and as they expand and as they start to discover different places on the map, I can either, put them in, or I can use the ones that are currently there and start fleshing out the territory. So the world is being developed as they experience it. So I use the map as the primary uh, idea generator for what the world is going to be like. The second thing that I do is, now that I had the basic continent played out, how am I going to start bringing in the various species, of player character? I avoid using races now. I call them species. So, how are humans, elves, dwarves, and halflings, and the various humanoid races going to end up interacting with one another? And one of the things that I wanted to do for my world was I wanted to make the common tongue, which is usually used in Dungeons and Dragons settings, but I wanted to put a little twist on it, and I didn't want all of the player characters to potentially start off speaking the same common tongue. They would speak a regional tongue from based on where they had come from, and then there was a chance that they would potentially know adjacent common languages for the countries that were immediately surrounding or coming into contact with them. And so when I had done that, there was one player who did not speak the same common tongue as the other players, and so, but she did speak Elvish, and so that was the common connection between her and the one of the elf characters, and so uh, both females, because they're both female characters, both females had to translate between each other and then further translate to the rest of the party. And so that became a very interesting dynamic to take place, and that is language. So, language of the world, I decided in my world building would become something a little bit more important than I think it is in many other settings. The other component that I started thinking about next was, how is alignment going to work? And alignment is a really, touchy subject in Dungeons and Dragons. whether it's a good system or it's a bad system, it should be thrown out. Do you use just the three that the oldest versions of Dungeons and Dragons use, whether it be law, chaos, or neutrality, or do you go with the nine alignments of advanced Dungeons and Dragons or something else? So I knew I'd have to think about that a little bit as far as just getting a general sense of how these countries were going to run and what kind of alignments they might attract to help develop the character of these seven these seven realms of Carador. And once I started developing that, I started thinking about, all right, well, this country is going to be like lawful neutral to lawful good, but still expansionist, in a sense, and that became the realm of Carador. So it is an expansionist nation, and it doesn't have a pristine history. There have been times that it has taken advantage of its strength and power for the purposes of expanding its territories for selfish purposes. There's other times where it has come to the aid of other, countries weaker than itself in order to defend them. Um, so it's kind of a gray area, and each of the realms has that kind of a sense of the gray area. Some a little bit less gray than others. Some leaning more towards, a much darker cultural um, identity for the realm as a whole, which is where I get like Drakma is a nation almost entirely populated by various humanoid races and um, dragons, or those that worship dragons, or um, evil wizards and the type. It's the quasi Mordor of this particular continent. The realm of Darrowfell, which you can see down here in this in the blue, all right, in the bottom left hand side, is kind of a dark mercenary kind of country. So it's very aggressive. Doesn't always fight its own wars. It likes to fight wars for others as well. Um, but it's a warrior culture. They really do look to engage in combat, for their own purposes or out for hire. So if you can imagine a nation where most of the people are working within a trade of mercenary warfare, then you'd get a sense of what that realm is very like or very similar to others throughout history. It's kind of like the Sparta of of the realms, and so on. So with each of I'm not going to go through all seven for this video, but for each of them, I started thinking about, well, what is this country or nation uh, going to feel like if you're an outsider looking in? The next thing that I had to decide on was Pantheons. So what would the Pantheons be in this world setting? And since I have dabbled with the idea of creating a pantheon from scratch, and just naming the different deities and what domains do they each represent, and I've done that in the past, but I don't believe in reinventing the wheel either. And so I decided with this particular world, for the demi-humans and for the humanoids, they would use the world of Greyhawk deities that existed. And then for the humans, I actually leaned more towards I leaned more towards either North mythology or the Hyborian world mythology, Robert E. Howard's Hyborian world, for those particular deities. And so that's that's another element that I would use to help flavor each of the seven realms of Carador. So now we have various religions that might exist in one region that don't exist in another, and then the more the players begin to understand those religious beliefs, they can then understand how they have influenced the governments of the various realms. And so it kind of fleshes out as they move about and learn more about the much larger, expansive world. They will gain that knowledge along the way. Once I had the different pantheons selected, then I started looking to underplay alignment for clerics and later for paladins as well, by looking at the domains, and that's something that I would do in any D&D campaign. At this point, is that to me, priests should adhere to the domains, or paladins complete tasks or feats that match up with the domains of a deity, rather than just say, well, I'm working within this kind of nebulous alignment kind of structure. If you're worshiping a god of light and healing and loyalty and such, then a cleric of that deity, in order to be able to access his spells, would have to perform acts of light or healing or show signs of loyalty towards someone or something, and that's how they replenish their spell use. It's kind of their form of praying. Is not just the act of, hey, every night I'm going to go home and I'm going to sit there and I'm going to pray to my deity. No, it has to be more, this is what I have done, or this is what I'm planning on doing. And that way it kind of generates an interaction that could take place. It could even generate an adventure where the cleric in the group is kind of driving the entire group because they have some kind of a task and that they need to meet in order to keep their access to the divine powers within their particular religion. So, just to recap briefly, I've talked about just the physical or geographic structure of the world, or at least the part of the world where the players are going to be functioning on in order to start to drive the story of world building. Then, as I came closer into view, just the philosophy of start small and expand from there. Make sure your player characters understand the town that they've begun in, and then the city that they've traveled to, and then the region that they're currently functioning in, and then get into all of the other geopolitical and religious or cultural or just the much larger aspects. You might also want to, in the early going of world building, and I think world building is a process that starts from zero, and as you as the DM and the players are running your various sessions, the world becomes clearer and clearer in everyone's views, including your own views as a DM. You should be, taking what your characters are asking to do, or your player characters are asking to do in the world, and as you're generating adventures, you're taking notes and you're jotting down, well, hey, this is something that I want to remember, because I want to create that continuity in the world so that if the players encounter something very similar, both you and they will be able to draw upon that, and there will be reasonable expectations that, you know, every red opaque potion is a healing potion. All right, and every yellow is something else, and so on. And that's something that I had also done in my campaign, as I started color coding, and viscosity labeling each of the potions as the players came, into contact with them. And once they discovered their uses, then they can keep a running log of, hey, we know that a gray, semi-cloudy potion, is a gaseous form potion. The yellow is an ESP potion, and so on and so forth. I think recalling that that's pretty much the color coding I actually used. So, so yes, there is record keeping on the part of the DM and on the part of the players in order to help flesh out the world as you're world building as you go. Now, I am going to admit that this is my first real venture into having the world unfold as the players unfold it. All right, so this is the most player directed campaign mode that I have used, and it seems to be working out, fairly well. I was really quite surprised at how much story is being told just almost on the fly as we're going through these various, adventures. The other thing that I would strongly recommend, and you can do this whether you're world building or not, is every player character should be given a slight story on their own, like a very brief little story on their own. Something that might be a next step or an adventure idea, an adventure hook, I should say, that the rest of the players may not be aware of, and then let them role play that out, and they can say, "Hey, I'm the thief, and I discovered a treasure map, and I think that it would be beneficial that we all go on this." The cleric might have gotten a notice from his or her higher ups that, hey, there's a crypt that we want you to investigate. There's suspected undead activity in there, and if the players all want to attend, they'll all go. And so when you as the DM are giving the players all of these little uh, adventure hooks and tips and hints and things like that, um, it helps them feel like they're a part of the world building aspect, because they genuinely are. As they're traveling and you're plopping down whole new towns that weren't there beforehand, then they're building up the world, and then you can decide, well, this is a big event that I want to bring in, regardless of what the players are doing. And then other times you're going to sit as the DM and say, you know what, hey, that's a really cool idea. We're going to run with that. And the next two or three adventures are going to revolve around that theme that this player has, come up with. And I think that really encourages the players to think about what is it that they want their characters to do in their lives. So I am sure that there are 10,000 other ways that you can do world building. This is my own, and as I said, this is kind of a test. I've never done it to this level before, and with the amount of flexibility that I've built into this process this time around. But it has been, pretty successful. So at least I think it has been. I think my players are enjoying it, so I'm pretty sure it's been successful for them as well. So once again, thanks for stopping in. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, please consider subscribing. If you have comments and questions, or you'd like to drop off a comment that says, "Hey, will you take a look at this?" or "Will you do a video on that?" I've shown time and time again. I love to have those ideas coming in. I will follow up and create a video based on your request. As long as it's not too crazy, but or sometimes I takes some time to get around to doing them, but eventually I will get around to doing them. And I just hope that you keep on playing out there, keep on playing these games, be creative in your own when you're running your own campaigns. Um, Play your hand at creating a world, write your own adventures. Encourage your players to help you develop the world as they're going about uh, living vicariously through their player characters, and just keep on exploring. Explore the creative aspects of the role playing hobby that we all are enjoying and love playing at. So once again, thanks for joining. I look forward to seeing you on the gaming screen sometime soon. You'll have a great afternoon and take care.